Hello everyone, welcome back or welcome to Rainy Rambles. My name is Damla and I talk about books on here. Today I want to talk about some of my favorite books so far this year. I do want to say there is a chance that this might change by the end of this year, but I just wanted to look at what I've read so far and what I'm really happy with. By the way, sorry if you can hear my fan in the background, but it is really hot in my room and I will evaporate if I don't have it on. Most of the books are 5-star reads. 2 of them are 4-star reads, and then one of them I didn't give a rating but still wanted to mention. The reason why I didn't rate it is because it was a memoir. Also, these are in no particular order necessarily, I just really enjoyed them. First, I want to talk about We Free the Stars by Hafsah Faizal. I ate this up. I loved this book so much. This is the second and final installment of the Sands of Araria duology, and the first book, We Hunt the Flame, was actually I think the first book that I finished this year. Just to give you the plot of this duology real quick, we follow our main characters, Nasir and Zafira, who both are from this nation that is... there's something wrong with the magic there. So for example, Demenur, which is the nation that Zafira is from, is sort of plagued by this eternal winter. And there's also this cursed forest in the nation called the Arse that seems to be expanding, and basically anyone who goes into this forest cannot get out except for Zafira. She's sort of known as the hunter in her village. People don't know that she is the hunter, but this hunter then goes into this forest and gets meat and helps the village to survive. Zafira ends up going on this quest to restore magic in the kingdom. She has to go and retrieve this artifact. Nasir is also sent to retrieve this artifact, but he is sent to kill the hunter. So plot-wise, I loved it. The plot was super interesting. The reason why I'm putting the second rather than the first book here, though, is that in terms of plots and the pacing, the first book was a little bit slower in the middle parts, and here I felt like there was something happening all the time, or at least I wasn't bored at points. And in the first book, it wasn't so bad that I ended up being like, oh, I'm gonna DNF this, but it did affect, I guess, my reading experience, and I think I ended up giving that one 4 stars. I loved the characters in this book. I loved every single one of them, and without saying too much, I ended up getting too attached to some characters when I really shouldn't have. I think that tells you enough. Hafsah Faizal's writing style is absolutely beautiful. I remember thinking to myself, even if I didn't end up liking this book, I would end up reading her next release just because she writes so beautifully, and the prose is... I love it. I also love the story behind this duology because initially Hafsah Faizal was actually writing a fantasy that was based on Welsh mythology, or based on Wales, I guess, because she felt like, or it was a thing at the time, that fantasy that took place in non-Western nations wasn't really getting picked up and not really that popular, but she ended up changing it to a nation based on ancient Arabia, and it got picked up, and I think that's beautiful. I would love to see more Middle Eastern representation in fantasy. The other 5-star read that I have physically is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune, which is a cozy fantasy that follows our main character, Venus Baker, who works at the department in charge of magical youth, and he goes to these orphanages where magical youth are, and decides if they can remain open or not. And one day he is sent to go to this orphanage that is an exceptional case. I can say this because it's on the back of the book, but basically one of the kids is the Antichrist. And yeah, that makes for a very interesting setup, I think, and I absolutely love this book. I loved all of the kids in the orphanage. They were so adorable, so sweet. And then we also have Arthur, the owner of the orphanage, who I also thought was such a wonderful character. I loved everyone here. The story also has a message that I think is pretty clear, but not too on the nose that it gets repetitive. And yeah, it was beautiful. I really liked how it was written again as well. I think TJ Klune writes pretty well. There's actually a second book coming out, but I would say that you can read this as a standalone as well. There are some things sprinkled into the end of the first book that leave a possibility for a setup for a second book, but I think you would do just fine reading the first. But if you are interested, you can read the second one as well. I might be tuning in for that, so yeah. Another 5-star read I don't have with me, sadly, but it is All My Rage by Sabaa Tahir. I actually was thinking about this book before I fell asleep last night, which is so weird, I know, but I was just thinking about it. I love this book so much. I cried so much. Sabaa Tahir writes so well and so beautifully, and the book reads very quickly as well. But let me get into the plot. We follow two characters, Salahuddin and Noor, who were both friends, like childhood friends, until some fight happened in high school. We don't really get to know what the fight is about until later, so I can't really say much about that fight specifically. Salahuddin, or well Sal as he's also named, and Noor are both Pakistani characters. I think Noor specifically was born there and Sal was born in the US, but a child of immigrants. And we follow them both, their stories and their backgrounds, and it is just a beautiful book. Like, I can't describe how much I love it. I feel like you just have to read it and know how amazing this book is. Oh my god. This is why I was thinking about this last night. The characters don't feel like characters, they feel like people almost. Like, when I'm talking about this, I feel like I'm talking about people to you. I'm telling you about a person, not about a character. And while reading, which is not always the fault of the writer, you kind of consciously know, like, I'm reading a book, this is fiction, but it felt so real. I feel like I have a Noor in my family. I feel like I have someone who is like Sal's mom in my own family. And that might also be because of the fact that, you know, they're predominantly Muslim. The Muslim representation is amazing, by the way, and so, like, multifaceted. We get to meet so many people, and it's just, I loved it so much. I can't speak on the Pakistani representation because I'm Turkish, so I can't really say much about that. So if any Pakistani people want to chime in there, go ahead. But yeah, I just absolutely loved it. Really, oh my gosh. Amazing, show-stopping, spectacular. I was crushed by the end of it. Next up, I'm going to talk about the book that I didn't give a rating because it's a memoir, which is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. This is a memoir following Jennette McCurdy's life as a child actor, a child star, and we talk about issues such as her going through an eating disorder, her complicated, very difficult relationship with her mom, and just like navigating being famous because she was an actor for Nickelodeon. For those who don't know, she was in a show called iCarly where she played Sam Puckett, and how even like that character kind of had like an effect on her and her like relationship with food, if I recall correctly. This memoir was beautiful. I listened to the audiobook and it was narrated by Jennette McCurdy herself, and I feel like that adds an additional layer of emotion to it. It was so beautiful and so well written, so I don't know how to describe it. It really kept me in. I kept wanting to like learn more about her as a person. I didn't read this thinking like, oh, this is like Jennette McCurdy the actor, but it felt like, you know, just her as a person and the experiences she went through. And she's sometimes able to talk about things in a way that is so mature, but at the same time you get to understand what her mindset at the time was when she was experiencing this, which I think is beautiful. It's so beautifully written, and I highly recommend reading it. Even if you don't know who Jennette McCurdy is, I just think it overall is beautiful. Will have to say it can be triggering for those with eating disorders who have dealt with it, who are sensitive to it, and I've seen people say that some of the stuff about her with her mother was pretty triggering to them as well. So do read it with caution, you know, if any of those issues might affect you. Then we're on to my 4-star reads. I'm gonna talk about the one that I have physically, which is The Tempest of Tea by Hafsah Faizal. Are we noticing a pattern here? This is Hafsah Faizal's third book, and I think this is going to be a duology too. The second book is coming out next year, where we follow our main character Arthi. This is like loosely based on the legend of King Arthur as well, who runs a tea room that turns into a blood house by night for vampires. And she runs this tea house with her like not related by blood bro. They're essentially siblings, who is called Jin. And basically we come to find out that Spindrift kind of is in danger, and Arthi and Jin end up, well, mostly Arthi, wanting to do this heist, and so they're putting this crew together to perform this heist. I love this book. I love it so much. Again, Hafsah Faizal's writing, beautiful, wouldn't expect anything else. The characters were great. There was one character that I didn't really care about that much, who was like, it was Mateo. I didn't care about him that much. Not that I didn't like him, I was just kind of like, about him. The others I was really attached to and very interested in each and every one of them. They were very distinct. Some people didn't like the fact that the heist started a little late, but for me personally, it did start kind of late, but I wasn't bored necessarily. It was still fun. There were still things happening, but I guess if you're really here for like just the heist, you might be a little disappointed because it starts kind of late. And I also saw some people were disappointed because they expected more vampires. I didn't really see that, but I don't know. I will also say this book was advertised to some as Peaky Blinders meets Six of Crows, and as someone who has read Six of Crows, I think the only thing that they have in common is that there's a heist, that there's like a crew, and maybe Arthi and Kaz have some similarities, but they're really not the same. So I can't say much about Peaky Blinders, but I've seen people be disappointed because of that comp title, I think is what it's called. Still loved it. I gave it 4 stars. I thought this was a lovely book still. Lastly, I want to talk about an arc that I really enjoyed, and I think you should, if you can, still request it, or maybe read the actual book. I read Until We Shatter by Kate Dillon, and I absolutely loved it. So this is again a heist book where we follow our main character Kim, who is going to do a heist with her friends, as well as someone who isn't really her friend. This is a fantasy book, and the magic system in this book is super intriguing, and it makes the plot super interesting and super fun. There's kind of like 2 worlds in a way, and they're using a color-based magic system. I also thought the characters were absolutely great. The romance that is there is also amazingly done, in my opinion. I really liked it. This book also kind of like crushed me. There's one chapter that the author kind of, I feel like anyone that is reading this arc at that chapter, everyone's like, what did you do to me? Like, why? And I felt that too. If you're looking for a fun heist book with an incredibly fun magic system, and I think this is a standalone, but don't quote me on that. It was wrapped up very nicely by the end of it. If you want to read a standalone, maybe consider checking that out, because I absolutely loved it. I think it's a great book. Also, the cover is gorgeous. I probably will put the cover somewhere here, but I loved it so much, and the cover also kind of is what drew me in. It looks really great. So those were my favorite books so far this year. I really loved all of these. I might do this with books that disappointed me, but I don't want to be too negative, but also being disappointed is part of the reading experience, so I might do it if you guys are curious. Let me know what some of your favorite books have been this year, or maybe if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. Again, this might be changing by the end of this year, maybe by the end of the year. Some of these books aren't my favorite anymore, or some books are added to this list, who knows. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please take care of yourself, and I will see you next time. Bye.